Hi everybody, I'm Al Bernstein and welcome to this edition of the Big Fight Boxing Show. We're happy that you joined us. On this episode, our guest is going to be Ariel Helwani, the great combat sports journalist who covers both mixed martial arts and boxing as well. He is got a great new project coming out called Uncrowned, which is going to be starting very soon, that is going to be across a number of media outlets. And I think is going to be one of the most interesting developments in the coverage of combat sports in quite some time. We're going to talk to him about that and some other things, mostly boxing related as well, a little later on. But I want to use the first part of the show to preview a fight that's coming up that I'm excited about, and I know all of you are excited about, and that is the light heavyweight unification match between Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol. This fight has been years in the making, and it's a fight that people have longed for some time, and it will be happening on October 12th. And it is a fight that has many questions coming in, which is what makes it so interesting. First of all, the fight was postponed because of a shoulder injury to Beterbiev, and that added some intrigue to it because people are wondering now how well will he be able to get past that injury and be ready for this fight. They say he is, and his training camp's gone well. Then there's the question of Beterbiev's age. He is 39 years old, though he has shown no signs of his skills diminishing, and he has been terrific. He's undefeated. He has won every single fight by knockout. Still, you wonder for fighters at age 39. However, he is a skilled boxer. In addition to his power, which is pretty amazing, he has shown the ability with a great jab and ring IQ to be a very skilled boxer as well. The man he's facing is the very definition of skilled boxer in Dmitry Bivol. He has put on clinics in fight after fight after fight. 9 of his last 10 fights have gone the distance, unlike Beterbiev. He tends to win by decision. But we've seen him fighting off the front foot and showing pop in his punches. In his fight against Canelo Alvarez, when he beat the star of boxing in Canelo Alvarez, he fought off the front foot a lot, especially in the later rounds after he had already outboxed Canelo Alvarez for much of the fight. So we have two things going on in this fight that tell you that you can't just assume this is a simplistic situation. There's a lot of nuance to it. It's not just the power punching Beterbiev against the boxer in Bivol. Both of these men have a very eclectic set of skill sets. And Beterbiev is a better boxer than people think, and Bivol probably has a little more pop in his punches than some people imagine. It's a fight that boxing fans have longed for. We've never had an undisputed champion in the four-belt era for the light heavyweights. And the fight it reminds me of most is a fight back in 1983, which I attended, which was the last time there was a unification match in the light heavyweight division. There were 2 belts on the line at that time. There were only 2 belts, Dwight Muhammad Qawi and Michael Spinks. And that was highly anticipated, as this fight is. It was a little more one-sided than people thought. Michael Spinks winning a pretty clear decision. But it was nevertheless an exciting event, and boxing fans were thrilled to have it happen. We feel exactly the same way about this fight, and I think it's going to be a terrific matchup. I think we're going to see maybe more boxing in this than we think from Beterbiev, and maybe more front foot fighting on occasion from Bivol. But certainly both men will be true to their nature, and Beterbiev hopes that he can get yet another knockout in this fight, and Bivol hopes that he can box his way to victory. So I think it's going to be a fantastic fight set for October 12th, and I think one of the keys to watch for in this fight is the jab. Both men are so skilled at letting the jab set up everything they do. And we'll see which one, if either, wins the battle of the jab. And I think then that's going to set up some of the other things that they can both do, especially Beterbiev getting inside and ripping those hooks to the body and the head and the overhand rights and things. And if Bivol controls with his jab, he'll be able to control the distance and pop in the straight right hand when he wants to, which is a very good weapon for him. So we're all looking forward to that on October 12th, and I think it's going to be a terrific matchup. Well, let's get to the interview I did with Ariel Helwani, who is, as I said, one of the top journalists in combat sports, covering mixed martial arts, which was the roots of his coverage of combat sports. And now, in recent years, he's done more in the boxing world and just covered the Daniel Dubois Anthony Joshua fight over in England. So here is the conversation I had with Ariel. Ariel, it is great to have you on the show. You are, of course, known as the major voice in combat sports, especially in MMA. And while this show's a little more boxing centric, I want to ask you your relationship with boxing, which I know you certainly have one, and you and I have even worked together on a couple of different shows. How has that relationship been over the years for you as a fan and as somebody covering the sport?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. You're a legend, and I appreciate you even reaching out. And it was a tremendous honor for me to work with you a few times over at Showtime.
We had a nice time.
Yes, I grew up a huge fan of combat sports in addition to the traditional sports. And so when I say combat sports, initially my introduction to combat sports was pro wrestling. And then I learned about boxing, and then I learned about MMA. And I come from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, which has a rich history of boxing. And so I would go to a lot of those cards. I saw Artur fight. I was a big fan of the Grant brothers, Otis Grant and Howard Grant.
Fighters, yeah.
I was very excited when Otis fought Roy Jones. It didn't last very long, but it was exciting to see a Montreal guy fight against the pound for pound best. And so I've always adored boxing. I've always enjoyed it. When I was in college, I started my own combat sports radio show, which I would talk about MMA, boxing, and pro wrestling. And then when I left university and got into the production side of things, I decided to really focus on mixed martial arts because I felt like there was an opening, and it wasn't being covered as professionally and as well as its combat counterparts. To tell you how much I love boxing and to tell you how much it has always meant to me. And I know people tend to associate me with MMA just because that's the lane that I chose, but it's not because I was anti-boxing. I never subscribed to the notion that you had to be a fan of one or the other. In 2003, when I was a junior going into my senior year at Syracuse University, I applied at HBO Sports for an internship because I was such a big fan of HBO boxing. And so I got to work there for one summer. And actually, on my first day on the job, so to speak, or the internship, I got to go to a shoot for Roy Jones. He had an upcoming fight, and I just got to sit there and watch them do it. And I was blown away that I was able to be in the same room as the great Roy Jones Jr. And then the following year, when I graduated, I worked for HBO for a year in their documentary department. And one of the great things that they afforded to me when I left my internship and went back for my senior year at college, they let me go into their their promotional materials room, and I got to grab all the old fight posters and all the old merch. And
Wow.
I covered my apartment in senior year of all these Roy, Shane Mosley, De La Hoya posters. And I was very excited about that. So yes, I adore boxing and have had an opportunity to do a little bit more over the last few years. And I hope to do even more down the line as well.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second or two. I agree with you. In my book, I wrote a whole chapter about my experiences with MMA. I've done lucky enough to do play-by-play a couple times on mixed martial arts shows, and I really enjoyed it. And I talked in there about how it's such a misnomer that fans have to pick a sport, one or the other, and that one sport, people from one sport or the other are, hate the other one. There may be some like that, but for the most part, I find that the combat sports tent allows people to roam back and forth freely as they want.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to me, and I know there's a bit of a rivalry over pay-per-view dollars and eyeballs and whatnot, and certainly some characters within the sport haven't helped.
Yeah.
Bob Arum famously.
They have inflamed it sometimes. Yes,
exactly, and I get it because they're trying to they're trying to make it tribal. But I'm someone who loves all. Ultimately, what it comes down to is this guy against this guy or this woman against this woman under the bright lights in Las Vegas or New York or wherever on a Saturday night, and the world is watching, and you want to see who the better person is. And so I don't care if that's in boxing. I don't care if it's in MMA. I don't care if it's in kickboxing, in jiu-jitsu, in wrestling. I just like that notion of nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. May the best man or woman win. And so I can appreciate all the nuances. And as a journalist, I would say, often I find boxing a lot more interesting to cover, if only because there are different layers and elements to boxing that we don't have in MMA, such as, the different promotions, the different sanctioning bodies, the different characters, the network executives. All these things aren't really, there's really one dominant beast in MMA.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. Purse bids, things like that. We don't have those intricacies in our sport. And I love that stuff. I know fans will lament those things. And I know some fans feel like, this is a mess. I wish it could all be streamlined and be a lot more uniform. But I actually love it because I think it gives us a lot to talk about.
You like the chaos a little bit, huh?
Yes. I think that is accurate.
It definitely
just look at the last few days. There's been so much drama, like that press conference last week in London where Chris Eubank is going off on Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn. And all this other stuff, and I'm like, this is great. And then you have Friday. Sandy Ryan is, and I'm not happy this happened, but she walks out of her hotel and she gets doused with paint. Like, where do you come up with this stuff? So there's a lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah, I always say, just when I think I've seen the craziest thing. I mean, I've been covering boxing obviously for over 40 years. Just when I think I've seen the craziest thing, I haven't seen the craziest thing, right? And so that's for sure. You were there for the Anthony Joshua Dubois fight, Daniel Dubois, which was a remarkable event. I've been there several times to announce Joshua fights at Wembley with 90-some thousand people. And it was an extraordinary scene and an extraordinary ending for that fight.
Oh yeah, I've never been to Wembley before. Obviously, I've watched events there from afar, whether it's boxing, whether it's football, soccer, pro wrestling as well. There's a famous event that happened there in 1992, the old Wembley, but around the same area. And to be there, and they talked about 96,000, but unless you're like there and you witness it, and the UK fans, I adore the UK fans.
Yeah.
Their knowledge, their love, their respect of combat sports. There's a radio station there, which is their predominant sports radio station. It's called Talk Sport. It's their version of ESPN radio, if you will. Right. And when I'm over there, and I actually have the app on my phone, I listen to them all the time. And often when I'm driving my kids to school, so it's like 7:30 a.m. here in New York, 12:30 over there, midday, they're talking about boxing, midday.
Yeah.
And you can't find, this better than anyone. Like you can't find any radio station on any like platform in North America that is talking boxing in a serious way, or talking fighting, even MMA. And they're talking about Joshua, and they're talking about Fury, and they're talking about Dubois, and they're talking about Chris Eubank and Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn and all this stuff. And so I love how it's football and then it's boxing in the UK. And so to experience that, 98,000 people, a great card, a tidy card. They had the curfew at 11 p.m. and they told us that it's a very important thing because Wembley's in a residential area, and if they go past 11, they either get charged 150,000 per 15 minutes, or they turn the house lights on. And they said that it happened to Paul McCartney, of all people, that he went past the curfew and they turned the house lights on. So they said, like, we don't care, we don't stop for anyone. This event has to be done. And sometimes these events, especially the Riyadh season ones with the concerts and whatnot, they could drag. This one was quick. They just kept it moving. Great results, great crowd, great atmosphere. Liam Gallagher played for a few minutes of Oasis, and then the fight itself was like, it actually the fight reminded me actually of a MMA heavyweight fight in that it was Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and they just went at each other like two bulls. And then obviously Joshua, there was so much intrigue, there were so many stories going into that fight about the new Joshua and him with Ben Davison and all this stuff, and Dubois was just a bit player, and then to see him emerge now as the number one contender, obviously the IBF champ, was just an amazing story to watch. So it was one of the most fun events that I've ever been able to take in person.
Well, it was great to see you cover it. And I mean, Daniel Dubois has been written off a couple of times already, and he's still young enough. And he came back and a brilliant performance. And I know in England, I just came back from England this past week where I was there for an event. They embrace mixed martial arts as well. So it's a great fan base. Let's talk about your new venture, which is very exciting. I think it's a potential game changer, really, in some ways, in terms of coverage of boxing and mixed martial arts. Your new venture with Yahoo Sports called Uncrowned, which is going to embrace both MMA and boxing, as well as wrestling as well, and it will be multi-platform. So it's starting on October 14th. Tell us about this new venture and how excited you are with it.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the kind words. I'm so excited about this. This is one of my many dreams. I've had the opportunity to do a show, to do a podcast, to write for other people, and it's always been for other people. But to now own my content, own my show, and to be put in a position where I can have my own team and partner with a great site like Yahoo, who has been, obviously a force on the internet for so long. They've gone through their ups and downs. They're now in this phase. They're past the rebuilding phase. They have a whole new regime in place. A lot of people that I've worked with in the past, and the vibes, as they say, are incredible right now. And so it was very important for me when my last contracts were up. I was doing a show for Spotify / The Ringer and Vox Media, that I wanted to own my show, that I wanted to expand it. I didn't want to be shackled by just one topic, just MMA per se. I wanted to cover all combat sports, and I wanted to have the audio and visual, wing of it all, not just my show, but other shows as well, a network, if you will. And then I also wanted to have the .com component, which means I wanted to have a place where there would be great journalism, great writing, great coverage of combat sports. And if you're just an MMA fan, great, it'll be there. If you're just a boxing fan, great, it'll be there. If you're a wrestling fan, great, it'll be there. If you're like me and like it all, it will be there. And we've amassed an amazing team. I'm so excited. Actually, just an hour or so ago, we had our first team call because everyone's officially on board. And to see this collection of talent, you'll know Keith Idek, who was one of the first people.
Great writer, really good.
Yeah, and just like a legitimate journalist, a respected, ethical journalist, and that's what I believe in, and that's what I like, and that's what I'm attracted to. And so we have, similar individuals covering all three entities, and we're not looking for clickbaity things. We're looking to do great features, great storytelling, shine a positive light, but also a critical light on all forms of combat, and hopefully give fans, if you're into just audio podcast, great, video, great. We have the YouTube channel, the written word, great. We'll have that as well, and I hope that this, as you said, will be that game changer in terms of giving fans of all three entities, or even one or two, a place where you can go and find great coverage. Because I think, and I obviously haven't been around as long as you have, but last couple decades, as I've been doing this, I don't know if there's ever been a time where all three, MMA, boxing, and pro wrestling, are experiencing tremendous highs at the same time. Obviously, you can nitpick about certain things, but I would argue MMA is on fire right now. The UFC has never been more successful. Boxing, with everything going on in these cards, my heart bleeds for the fact that HBO and Showtime are no longer around. But in terms of the depth of the cards, very, very, very promising. Pro wrestling is on fire with their new regime as well. So it's a very fun time if you like all of them or one of them. And I think this is a great time to do something like this. So I can't wait. As we're doing this, we're less than 2 weeks away. And it's quite literally a dream. One of my many dreams. I have many, many dreams. And I don't feel like I've quite accomplished them all yet, but to get to this point now where I can have something like this is very exciting.
Well, and it is, I think you made one of the points you made is to have all three of those things in one spot where people can pick and choose. And one of the offshoots of it, I personally think, is that when people visit, I think it's going to make more boxing fans into MMA fans and more MMA fans into boxing fans, even though, as we've acknowledged, many get crossover. If it's right in front of you, it's accessible to you. And I'm the perfect example. I watch mixed martial arts. Of course, obviously, I'm covering boxing and I do boxing. But I won't pretend to be an expert on every single division in mixed martial arts or every fighter in mixed martial arts, but I certainly like it. But just having it in front of me when I go on to something reminds me of it and makes me watch something. And so I think that could be a benefit from it.
I love that, and I'm reminded of something that just happened to me, which relates to what you're saying. So obviously, I've ramped up my own boxing coverage, and while I was at that Wembley event just a couple of weeks ago, I got a text from Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison is a tremendous MMA fighter, two-time Olympic gold medalist. She's a UFC title contender, and I'm sitting there at Wembley, and she texts me. She's like, "Oh my God, I love Anthony Joshua." And I'm like, "Yeah, cool. A lot of people love Anthony Joshua." And she's asking me questions about him. And I'm like, "Wait a second. Do you not know who Anthony Joshua is?" She goes, "I just learned about him from watching your interview with him." And I'm like, "Anthony Joshua's an Olympic gold medalist. You're an Olympic gold medalist. I thought you all knew each other." And she's like, "No, I don't watch boxing, but now I'm going to watch this fight tonight. I like it." So to your point, hopefully I could be a bit of a common thread and introduce MMA fans to boxing and vice versa, and the pro wrestling fans can get involved as well. I've long said that MMA's roots are in pro wrestling. There would be no MMA if there wasn't pro wrestling before it, and a lot of people have transitioned from pro wrestling to MMA and vice versa. So I believe that there's a Venn diagram out there of all the circles. And I reside in the middle, and there are a lot of people who reside in the middle. And if you don't, that's great as well. We'll still give you great coverage of your singular sport.
Yeah, absolutely. People can look at it. October 14th, you're kicking off. They'll be able to see it on YouTube, obviously, and your own website, uncrowned.com, I believe it is. So they'll be able to go over there and check everything out. And I love the idea also that it's the written word plus video. And that gives people a kind of a different view of everything. And when you see the written word, sometimes it flushes things out in a different way. And certainly the video will do that. And even the audio, which you point out, for sure too. You mentioned you're from Canada, and my history is that I work with, it seems like I'm drawn to people from Canada. I worked 11 years with Mauro Ranallo. Now I'm doing a boxing series with Corey Erdman. Both great guys and both really good people that really cover. Of course, Mauro covered the MMA a lot, and Corey a little bit. And of course, he's a terrific boxing announcer and writer. Combat sports. It seems like people from Canada tend to be the chroniclers a lot of times of combat sports.
Maybe Mauro is someone who I adore and have admired and lucky enough to call a friend. I remember the first time that he asked me to come on his radio show, Fight Network Radio, in 2007. I remember telling his producer that I thought that this was the apex of my career, that the great Mauro Ranallo was asking me, who even knew who I was mind-blowing. And Corey's amazing. I got to work with him a little bit at the Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney fight in April in Brooklyn. We like our fights. There's a rich history of boxing. Obviously, one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, George St. Pierre, is from Montreal. That's for sure. There's a rich pro wrestling history as well. The Montreal Forum hosted many great events over the years. Some legendary boxing events have happened there. Obviously, Leonard Duran happened at Olympic Stadium way back in the day as well. So there's been some great moments, and I don't know if it's the weather. I don't know if it's just our makeup. We're a hockey country as well. We like rough and tough sports, but I'll take that. I'll absolutely take that. And I think some of the best crowds that I've experienced, whether it's from afar or in person, have been Canadian crowds. Like it's a very passionate bunch. We love our fighting, all forms of fighting, and it's great to see it continue. And now in a broadcasting sense as well. Mauro, in my opinion, is the best combat sports broadcaster of my generation, in the sense that he can seamlessly transition from boxing to MMA to pro wrestling to kickboxing. I don't know of another person who can do that. It's rather remarkable.
I did he did a tryout show for Showtime, and I flew in to be the announcer with him. And when we finished, and that's the first boxing he'd ever announced in his life.
Wow.
We finished the show, and I turned to him and I said, "You're going to get this job." And that was excellent.
Wow.
And it was the first boxing he'd ever sat and announced. And so and I believe that when you're a competent broadcaster, if you do your homework, which he clearly does. So it's interesting what you're saying. Well, listen, this has been a joy chatting with you. I wish you the best of luck in Uncrowned. I think it's going to be a great venture, and I think it's going to be very beneficial to all combat sports fans.
Thank you so much. The great Al Bernstein asking me to do an interview. What a world we live in. This is bizarre, but I'm honored and touched, and love to see you out there doing your thing. You are a massive, massive part of all of us as this generation coming up. We listen to you. You are part of the soundtrack of so many great fights. So I wish you many, many more years of calling fights, and it's great to see you out there doing your thing, and appreciate once again you plugging the venture that we're launching soon, and all the good wishes as well. And I reciprocate them to you.
All right. Thanks, Ariel. Good to talk to you. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I thought it was fascinating. And one of the things I take from that conversation is this notion that combat, and we talked about it, that combat sports, both the mixed martial arts and boxing, can exist quite nicely under one big tent, and that people don't have to be fans of one or the other. They can be if they want, but they don't have to dislike the other one. And I'll tell a story that I haven't talked about that much, but many, many years ago, I did a infomercial, if you will, for what became the UFC, for what was the UFC. Dana White came to me, and they wanted, this was so far back, right at the embryonic stages of that organization, that they felt they needed a boxing voice to kind of lend credibility for combat sports fans to it. And he wasn't sure if I was even going to say yes to him. And I did. I said, well, I think this is an interesting undertaking that you guys have. And I'd seen a little of it. I wasn't an expert by any stretch of the imagination. And hosting it, I had to really bone up to know the phrases and some of the nuances of the sport. I certainly didn't become an instant expert on it by any stretch. But I did the infomercial for them. He was very appreciative, and it was way back at the beginning. Then after that, shortly, they didn't need any boxing voices to lend credibility to them. They were all good on their own. And as a side note to that, I was privileged to do play-by-play on some MMA shows for Showtime, both Strikeforce and a Bellator show, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing it, and by then I had become at least a little more conversant with all the MMA rules and some of the different skill sets that you need to do that sport. And it was fun working with Stephen Quadros and Pat Miletich, who of course were the experts. And so it was a very enjoyable experience, and I liked doing it. So the two sports kind of find a way to merge, I think, in many ways. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of the show. Just a reminder, if you want me to answer any questions that you have, send them on the right under the video where you can make comments, or you can get me at Twitter, at Al Bernstein, and send me questions, and I will be happy to answer them in future shows. We'll see you next time.